Tonight's episode of Gold Rush saw Fred Lewis have a huge blow-up with his Stepson Christopher. This season has focused a lot on Fred's crew, with a lot of time given to talking about his military career and even showing how his time as a medic helps in the mining industry. However, tonight's episode ended up with a family disagreement as Fred and his Stepson Christopher had a falling out. Here is what happened between the two men. Fred Lewis runs a crew that includes several United States veterans. As a former field medic in the war overseas, Fred wants to give back, and this makes his story on Gold Rush an important one this season. However, it is also a family affair, as his wife and his stepson also work on the site. It was an incident with his stepson that caused a huge conflict in this week's episode. It all started thanks to the continuous breakdown of Fred's equipment this season. He is trying to figure out how to keep the operation up and going despite the breakdowns. Fred already said he might have to quit after this season if he doesn't hit his goals. While talking to JB, he got some distressing news. The bracket on a dozer had cracked and Fred wanted to know why. JB said that Christopher had been a little hard on the equipment at times. He also said the breakdowns are due to operator error, and that is a problem. Fred admitted that the breakdowns are hurting them really badly this season. This led Fred to talk to Christopher and explain a change he has to make. He asked about the equipment, and Christopher said the equipment was trash. Fred said that he was removing him from the pile and putting someone else in his place. Christopher got mad and dropped some F-bombs before Fred tried to explain his position. Fred said he wasn't blaming Christopher, but he had to find out what was going on. He said if he removed Christopher and it kept happening, then it would prove he wasn't responsible. However, if he pulled Christopher and the breakdowns stopped, it would prove it was his fault, and they would retrain him. This made Christopher mad, feeling insulted, and said he didn't need any retraining. He then stormed off saying he was finished with everything. Yet, what Christopher might not understand is that Fred Lewis knows that if things keep breaking down, the entire mining camp might end up shut down and they won't be back next season at all. Do you think Fred Lewis might be in over his head by working with family? Does Christopher need to realize he might be a relative, but he is still working for his stepdad on Gold Rush? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Sean Esalilos has been a freelance writer for over 25 years and is a voting member of the Oklahoma Film Critics Circle. He is also a published author with a book about the Stephen King dollar baby filmmakers. Gold Rush. Fred Lewis clashes with Stepson on site. The sun had barely broken the horizon, casting a golden hue over the rugged terrain of the Alaskan wilderness. Fred Lewis stood at the edge of the claim, the weight of a shovel in his hand and a glimmer of hope in his eyes. After years of hard work and determination, he was convinced that this season would finally yield the gold he had always dreamed of. But today, the promise of wealth would be overshadowed by conflict, specifically, the kind that arises when family dynamics collide with ambition. Fred's stepson, Daniel, had joined him on the site for the season, a decision born out of necessity more than desire. Daniel, a city kid with dreams of adventure, had eagerly traded the comforts of urban life for the harsh realities of mining. However, his inexperience was evident, and Fred was quickly growing frustrated with what he perceived as Daniel's lack of seriousness. "Listen, Daniel, this isn't a game. You need to focus," Fred shouted, wiping the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the mess of equipment strewn across the site. "We don't have time to waste." Daniel shrugged, an air of defiance in his posture. "I'm doing my best, Fred. It's not as easy as you make it look." "Easy?" Fred's voice rose, the tension between them crackling like the dry Alaskan air. "If you think this is easy, then you don't understand the stakes. We're talking about our future here," their argument echoed across the barren landscape, a stark contrast to the serene beauty surrounding them. Fred, in his late 40s, had dedicated his life to gold mining, and the thought of failure was a heavy burden on his shoulders. Daniel, on the other hand, was in his early 20s, filled with youthful arrogance and a desire to prove himself. The generational divide between them only seemed to amplify their clash. "Maybe if you let me do things my way, we'd get more done," Daniel shot back, crossing his arms defiantly. Fred stared at him, incredulous. "Your way? You don't even know what my way is. You need to learn the ropes first. This isn't just about digging. It's about strategy and patience." Daniel's eyes flashed with anger. Deep breath, trying to rein in his frustration. The boy had potential, he just needed guidance. But it was hard to see past the thick fog of tension that had settled between them. "I'm not trying to belittle you, Daniel. I just want to keep us safe and on track." "Safe? You're the one who's always taking risks," Daniel replied, gesturing towards the unstable cliffs nearby. "If we're not careful, we could lose everything. Money and our lives." Fred's patience wore thin. "You think you can come in here and lecture me on safety? I've been mining since before you were born. I know what I'm doing." The sharpness of Fred's tone pierced the air, and for a moment, the only sound was the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional caw of a raven overhead. It was a moment of realization for both of them. Their shared passion for mining was being overshadowed by personal grievances. As the argument reached a boiling point, Fred turned away, the tension palpable. He picked up his shovel and began to dig, determined to let the physical labor ease his mind. Daniel, too, grabbed his own tools, but the silence between them was heavy, punctuated only by the sound of metal hitting earth. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky. They worked side by side, but the silence was deafening. Each stroke of the shovel was accompanied by thoughts of disappointment and unspoken words. Fred wondered if he had been too hard on Daniel. After all, the boy was trying. But as a father figure, he felt it was his duty to instill the values he believed were necessary for success. Finally, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the claim, Daniel broke the silence. "You know, I came up here because I thought we could bond, maybe do something great together. But all I feel is pressure." Fred paused, resting his shovel against the ground. The sincerity in Daniel's voice caught him off guard. "I'm sorry if I've put too much pressure on you. It's just, this means a lot to me. I want to leave something behind for you." Daniel nodded, his youthful bravado softening. "I get that. But maybe we can find a way to do this together without the yelling." Fred sighed, the weight of their conflict lifting ever so slightly. "I'd like that. I didn't mean to make you feel like you're just here to carry my burdens." As they shared a moment of vulnerability, the tension that had defined their day began to dissipate. They worked side by side, but now there was a newfound respect in their movements. Fred showed Daniel the nuances of prospecting, how to read the landscape, where to dig, and the importance of teamwork. As the days turned into weeks, they found a rhythm. Fred learned to trust Daniel's instincts, while Daniel grew more skilled and confident. Together, they unearthed small nuggets of gold, each one a testament to their collaboration. The promise of riches became less about the gold itself and more about the bond they were forging. One evening, as they sat by the fire, roasting fish caught from the nearby river, Fred looked at Daniel, a sense of pride swelling within him. "You know, I've seen a change in you. You're really becoming a miner, just like I always wanted." Daniel smiled, the flickering firelight illuminating his face. "Thanks, Fred. It's nice to feel like I'm part of this." Fred raised his canteen in a toast. "To new beginnings and hard-earned gold to new beginnings." Daniel echoed, clinking his canteen against Fred's. As the stars began to blanket the sky, the two shared stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. In that moment, the gold rush was no longer just about the precious metal buried beneath the earth, but about the riches of connection and understanding they had discovered in one another. The clash had forged something more valuable than gold, a true partnership. With their spirits lifted and their relationship strengthened, Fred and Daniel prepared for the days ahead. The promise of adventure still lingered, but now they faced it together, ready to tackle whatever challenges the Alaskan wilderness had in store. The bond between them, tempered by fire, would not only guide their mining efforts, but also serve as the foundation for a lasting family legacy.